Hi, everybody, and welcome to another really live edition of Green Rush, the cannabis business talk show that we produce here at Pro Cannabis Media every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. That would be your Eastern Standard Time, although I think it's now daylight savings time. I'm so confused by all this. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Happy to be with you today on this very special day. It's a special day because it allows us to step back and thank those who have been fighting for our freedoms all over the world. It is Veterans Day, and we will be celebrating Veterans Day in a very unique way here at Pro Cannabis Media. Not only do we have one of our favorite people in the studio, if you will, with us, our Zoom studio. We also are going to treat you to one of the best shows we've ever produced here. It happened to be back in February of 2021, and it featured quite a few veterans that are in the cannabis space. But perhaps the one guy that is the veteran in Massachusetts, our home state, is Stephen Mandilli from Uxbridge. Hello, Stephen. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here on Veterans Day. Thank you for having me.
And thank you, because I know you were in demand all over the place today, this whole week. So I do appreciate you carving out a little bit of a slice for us just to chit chat for a little while before we get to that show. And by the way, you were on that last show back in 2021, in case you didn't remember.
I do remember that show. That was a great show, heavy on the veteran content. I always love it.
Yeah, no, I think it was great. I think we actually played your PSA in the middle of that too at some point. So we do appreciate that. Hey, I obviously have a very a good background on who you are and what you've gone through in your life. But I always like to review that with people because you never know who's watching this program perhaps for the first time, or our regulars who tune in on a regular basis on Friday afternoon. And I just thought it might be good for them to kind of hear what is your background. I mean, you are a veteran of the Iraq War, and you served in the Massachusetts National Guard troop that ended up going to Iraq. Isn't that right?
Yes, Jimmy. Yep. Yeah, I mean, this is my least favorite thing to do, but it's important to talk about it, talk about my journey, how I started. So I was injured in Iraq. It was in a Humvee crash, had a severe spinal cord injury, ended up getting medevaced home. An interesting part of that was, I got airlifted out. So I was airlifted out with people that are with fellow service members that are clinging on to life. Like, they have a full team with them on this plane, working on them the entire time when we fly from Kuwait, from Iraq to Kuwait, then Kuwait to Germany. And I was in a position where I was barely able to walk, so I'm on a stretcher and I'm around all these amazing people, and I'm just in awe the whole time. And it was an interesting journey coming back home. I ended up having spinal cord fusion. I found out I had brain injury and, of course, PTSD. Wanted to get better, so I followed the treatment plan that was laid out in front of me by the VA. It just so happened that it was lined with I had 57 different medications over a decade that I tried to ease the pain and be able to move forward with my life, when all of these medications really did nothing besides stop me from growing, and the opposite of growing is dying. And I was just focused on everything wrong in life, everything that made me angry, everything that made me hate, and went to a dark place, to a suicide attempt. I'm fortunate and blessed with an incredible family. So I had that support system to pull me out of that, and quickly realized that between that and cannabis, I'm blessed with things that a lot of people don't have. They don't have a support system. They don't have the wherewithal, the clarity from the love they get to think, maybe I should try something different. It's tough. Other people with addiction know about this as well. It's not just exclusive to the military side of things. But yeah, I talked with my primary care doctor at the VA, said, I want to get off this stuff. You keep telling me you want to stop giving it to me, stop writing me the script, but I'm coming every month and I'm getting more fentanyl, more Percocets, all these medications that are, when I look them up, I'm like, these are terrible for me. Let me try something else if I can try all that. So I was, again, just fortunate to have a doctor that would listen and seeing what it was doing. So she literally put her job on the line to be able to lower my doses and taper me off and delay any sort of random urinalysis, because at that time, if you test positive for cannabis or anything that they're not prescribing you, they take all your prescriptions away. So then you're left cold turkey. So I didn't want to do that. That I knew that was failure. And after 5 months of using cannabis and tapering off, I was off of all but 2 drugs that weren't opioids. So it was separate drugs that I eventually got off of and later on, which, you know, but with cannabis made it possible. I wasn't looking ever to get rid of all the pain. I just wanted to get the enough pain off, but be able to keep my senses and have my wherewithal and be present. On those other medications, I couldn't do that. Cannabis allowed that, and allowed me to be able to think, okay, where am I going from here? How do I keep growing? And started looking around and said, all right, veterans don't have access to this. We need more access to this. I need to just go let people know about this. So started talking publicly about, you know, about my journey and what I've seen and what I've experienced. And even after all this time, I still get people that thanking me for, you know, in one breath, thanking me for my service, and the next breath, you're an addict. You're still an addict. You're on something else. And it's like, I'm okay with that, you know, because the amount of people I've been able to help with cannabis, veterans and non-veterans alike, from, you know, having veterans call me and I'm going over the house at 1 o'clock in the morning to just listen, like just listen and really, and smoke a joint and listen and just be like, all right, this does suck, but we're going to get through it. And that's it. And then to get that vilified by the same people that are telling us that they're there to help us in any way possible, it's bananas. And it's really difficult for a lot of veterans to wrap their head around it. And it's even, I feel like it's impossible for a civilian to kind of understand it, not even just the military side, but just the VA side of things. It's like, what?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you credit for a lot of things. First of all, you talk so beautifully, openly about the trials you've had. And we both have heard so many of these stories about how cannabis has changed my life. Cannabis has saved my life. Yours is always the one I bring up because I remember you telling me the story the first day of adult use sales in Massachusetts. And I believe it was November 20th, 2018. I might have that mixed up. Is it the November 18, 2018? I think it's November 20th, 2018. Do you remember?
You just messed me up. I was going to say 18, but then you said 20, so I'm not sure. But it's one of those two, I believe.
Yeah, I don't think it was 18 and 18 because then my mind would have remembered that. The 20 and 18 is where I think it is. So bottom line is you were the first one to purchase legal cannabis in Massachusetts. Can you tell me a little bit? I don't know if I know the backstory on how you got to the front of the line, Stephen.
Yeah, so that was what? That was 2016. It was the summer before the election, and I was already, without even knowing what was going on, I was standing out in front of the State House with signs about cannabis helping veterans and opioids, you know, hurting us. A member of the campaign just happened to walk by and started, you know, chatting me up, and I had a lot of practice from so many other people walking by being like, what's an opioid? And I'm going through wild. It was wild times. And I learned so much from people walking by, and I really learned how to communicate with people. And again, these were things I did not like to do. And I thought the only way I can change things is to do everything different. So, okay, you hate talking, get out there and go talk.
Right.
Things like that. And they asked me to be a spokesperson for the S on 4 campaign. And I did that knowing that while medical cannabis gives access to patients that are okay with registering, there's still a lot of people that benefit from cannabis that don't want to register and just want and are okay with paying the 20% sales tax on it and having to pay a little more for it and having no discounts. But in order for privacy, I understand that. So I saw that as another pathway for veterans, teachers, corrections officers, firefighters, everyone that gets, you know, tested and stigmatized that can't have it and can't risk being registered, to be able to have a pathway. So I wanted to do that. And then from recognized as a spokesperson, because I showed up in everyone's mailboxes, they asked me to be the first patient.
And that's great. And you know, I remember that day. I was really glad that we made the trek out there to cover it. I remember, you know, actually it's very similar to what's that?
It was like a snowy,
I was going to
muddy,
say it was
rainy
50, it
morning.
was like 30, 40 degrees, and it was kind of rainy and ugly. And there were hundreds of people in line out at now it's not Cultivate anymore. It's been sold a few times, which is fine. But it was out in Leicester, and again, the people that I talked to there recognized that it was a historic moment. And that was the day we met. I totally remember it.
Yep.
And when you told me the story, and I think the number you said was you were on something like 70 opioids, 70 different types of.
57 different medications and 9 different opioids.
Ay, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. And on top of all this, now that you've become a face of the advocacy movement and all that, you've also had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and talk on behalf of your fellow veterans. Am I right?
Yes, and thank you for mentioning that. That's been something that's, not only helped me help veterans, but it's really benefited my soul to be able to go down there with other veterans and get things done and actually see something from start to end. It is amazing. And where we're at on Veterans Day, I want to mention too, to thank all the veterans that are watching and listening, even the ones that aren't, and equally as important, their families that love them. Like there's no love like a spouse or loved one of a veteran that can deal with all that. There's so many days where we find it impossible to love ourselves or even like ourselves, and there they are loving us and lifting us up. On my trips down to DC, I've gotten to meet a lot of family members that have really touched my life. This past Memorial Day in May, I was down there to help advocate to push it's called the PACT Act, which was to give veterans benefits from toxic exposure from overseas at bases, and for them to be able to get treatment for it. Unfortunately, politics were played with it this over the summer in June, and they had 44 Republican senators vote it down for made up reasons. When we asked afterwards, it was Senator Toomey who was really driving the no vote, claiming that there was a slush fund in this bill and it was this and that. But every time someone asked them to point to it, they couldn't. There was nothing there. It was just a lie. They'd taken a vote, I believe it was June 27th. No, was it? I can't remember the exact date. I'm sorry, but
that's all right.
Voted on it. 44 voted no, and they showed it. Watching it on C-SPAN, and those senators are down on the Senate floor, fist bumping and high fiving each other because they blocked a bill giving healthcare benefits to our sickest veterans and their families. So I go back because veterans say, "Screw this! You're about to leave for July break. No one's going anywhere until this is figured out because we are done waiting." Veterans slept out on the Capitol for 7 days and nights to get this done. To get, I think it was 25 of them. We got to change their vote, but it took Gold Star families,
right,
widows. It took, I was out there. I was out there in a monsoon, sleeping out there, sitting out there all day with veterans that were terminally ill with cancer, walking around with their oxygen tanks, talking to members of Congress, pleading with them, like, we're not leaving because we're sick of watching our friends die. I met incredible family members. Rosie Torres, her and her husband are the founder of Burn Pits 360. Leroy is her husband's name. He has such a rare cancer that they can't treat, and now he gets benefits and they're not paying out of pocket. I unfortunately also met a family. It was actually the Heath Robinson's family. The PACT Act was actually named after him. It's the Staff Sergeant Heath Robinson Non-Exposure PACT Act exposure bill. And I met his mother-in-law, Suzanne Zier, and she was telling me stories of, they had to have a hospital bed in their house because the VA wouldn't treat him. He had a cancer so rare in his lungs, no tumors, okay? But full of cancer. So the doctors are saying this is definitely from being exposed to burn pits, gas. And the VA was like, yeah, but he smoked cigarettes. So he bled out in his living room floor, throwing up, everything. His family got no benefits. She was telling me stories of how after he died, her and her daughter, which was the widow of Heath Robinson, were cutting out the carpet themselves on their hands and knees and replacing carpet because it was just so stained and ruined, and they couldn't afford to pay anybody, and the VA wasn't giving them any benefits. So it was a realization that veterans get used as political pieces, and it's really time now more than ever for veterans to start standing up and making it so like it can't happen, whether it's running or always being in touch with your elected officials to make sure they're doing stuff instead of just, hey, we want to take a picture with you. It's like, well, what have you accomplished this year, this legislative session for veterans? You know, and that's really, you have to do that, because the way we're going to help the most veterans is through policy change, which takes, and I don't think people understand this, an act of Congress, which is one of the most I mean, I could probably train to run a marathon before I could write a bill and get it passed.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and Lord knows we can talk about this for hours, because I rave about this a lot, that we've lost what it means to be an American. And I'm talking about the both sides of the aisle, because they continue to point fingers at each other. And somebody needs to point the finger at the damn flag, because you guys put your lives on the line for that right. And no one should be able to take that away from you. I don't care what political party you are. These are the people, veterans are the people that need the help, because you've already paid the ultimate price. You have given years, months, whatever it is, time, service time of your life for this country's freedoms. Yep. So, you know, and you know, I'm sitting here looking at the scorecard of the Congress, and the Republicans have this many seats and Democrats have this many seats, and in the Senate is this, and I'm like, I'm not a big fan of the two-party system. Okay. I believe in a true democracy, not the republic that we have, even though we all know it's the best system in the world. There are changes that have to be made. Do you know that the only thing that both sides of the aisle agreed on unanimously over the last couple of years is the fact that slavery was a bad thing? It took them 166 years to figure that out. Really? Right. These are the people we're voting into office. So again, it's still up to people, the citizenry, to share those feelings with their elected officials, right? And you mentioned it, especially for veterans' rights.
Mm-hmm. And I know again, anytime I point my finger at something and say that needs to change, I look back and, you know, the other finger's pointing back at me and saying, what am I doing to change that? Right. I didn't understand the way things work. So I ran for office and thought, okay, let me learn how to do this. I'm not a good student, like sitting in a classroom kind of student. I need to go and see how it works. I need to, you know, take a piece, see all the pieces moving to be able to understand it. You know, I have a thick skull, so it takes some time for it to get through to the brain. But I get it. And like, that was my whole thing. I don't know if I'll ever go higher than municipal politics, because I don't want to choose a party. Being a municipal servant and elected official, I'm here to help the people that need help. I don't care what R, D, I, whatever letter you have in front of your name, it doesn't matter. I want to help you. And especially when it comes to veterans. Veterans are the only people in my life that get the benefit of, I will love you until you hurt me and give me a reason not to. Right. I don't give that kind of benefit to anyone else besides a veteran, because I know what they've sacrificed. I know they're hurting. I know sometimes, like a hurt dog, if you go to pet it, it might bite you a little bit. That it's expected. It's okay to me. But when someone else, you know, and I just get the, you're liberal, you're conservative. Like, I'm not. I'm
American.
All of you.
You're an American, Stephen. That's
right.
What you are. We all are. And what we've done, you mentioned it, RDI. How about just an A? We need to have an A party, the American party. This is what we need. Somebody told me my preaching, I should be running, and I'm like, no, please, no. And I give you credit, because not only did you decide to do something about it, you literally gave yourself to your town. And local politics, this is one of the things that people miss, because what good is my vote in Massachusetts? We know which way the state's going to go. That's half the problem. That labeling. These are our expectations. We need to change those labels, get rid of those labels, and find common ground. Find common ground on both sides of the aisle, and stop pointing fingers and looking for blame. And, oh, you're one of those, or you're this, or you're that. we've lost this because I got to tell you, the inmates are running the asylum in media these days. Okay. It's
Yeah.
consumer driven content. You guys, everybody out there gets to watch what they watch, when they watch it, how they watch it, where they watch it, and who's telling it to them.
You ask most kids, school age children right now what they want to be, and they want to be a social media influencer.
Ugh.
You know, like, what does that mean? So again, taking it upon my kids, like, you can look at that, but it's about service, it's about community, it's about having skin in the game in this. And you can't change what's going on all across Massachusetts or all over the country if you're not working on what's in your town and where you live in your community.
Right. And that vote perhaps is even more important than voting in the presidential election, right? And it's always the lowest voter turnout. Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. Even, I mean, town meetings. And again, I'm not blaming everyone for not knowing, because I didn't know much before I started doing it. But once you look in, you know, you kind of, with was it the sausage factory, see how the sausage is made? It's ugly, but you got to get past that and be like, okay, we gotta live here. We gotta find a way to make this work.
Yeah. Hey, there was a news item today in the Massachusetts area, and I think people who watch this show on a regular basis know that we're originating from the Massachusetts area. But coming up in just a few minutes, we have a show of people from all over the country explaining all these kinds of issues and what they've gone through. And we definitely want you to stay tuned for that. I'm probably going to go into the chat room and chat with the people that watch this show on a regular basis. And then, of course, at the end of that, we will be running our weekly Weed Talk No News program. However, one story did not make the news, and we can explain why if you really want to know. But the story had to do with the impact fees that local towns in Massachusetts used to charge, or still do charge in some cases, those who get licenses to sell plant medicine, cannabis, in their town. It was up to 3%, and they were called impact fees, Stephen, right? Impact fees. Now, you told me before we went on to the show that in Uxbridge, a very small town in Massachusetts, and you're a selectman there, you're still fighting to get rid of the impact fees in your own town. Am I right?
Correct. Yes. I mean, I've been against these fees since the beginning, since the ballot question got rewritten. So, you know, the governor would be okay with it, and have these fees for things that were never explicitly defined. You know, they opened up the what if box for everybody. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? Okay, well, we have to wait and see. It's a far-fetched, and any of those things are going to happen, and they haven't happened. But the towns still want, you know, these fees that in turn make these businesses not want to be very community friendly. You know, and I get it. You're going to take hundreds of thousands of dollars from me and save it and do nothing with it, or spend it how you're not supposed to. But I have all these nonprofits in your town that need help, asking me for help. You know, it's like, what are you going to do? And I really feel that getting rid of those fees would make these businesses a lot more friendly. We have to be business friendly communities, and we can't say, what if that happens, when we're not doing it to alcohol, which we know it does. We're not putting negative impact fees on CVS and everything, selling pharmaceuticals that are killing people. But we're saying that, you know, these businesses being here are a bad thing. I'll tell you what, in my town, they helped us through COVID. These businesses got us through COVID. We didn't have any empty stores or empty businesses in our town through COVID. We came out looking really good. So it's time to look back and say, like, all right, do we have anything to show besides we have extra, you know, we have more money that we have to keep an eye on in an account? Like, there's been no negative impact. We have businesses that are getting more business from, you know, you stop at it. When I go somewhere, I usually stop at a gas station. I might stop at a place to grab a coffee. So you're bringing in revenue to the town. And I don't see how that's a negative impact at all.
Right. Absolutely not. I think it was the Northampton mayor who was the first one to say, we don't need these impact fees. The cannabis dispensaries in their town weren't causing any trouble. They didn't have to put police on overtime or double up the protection and all this, which was a great thing. And I give Mayor Wu credit for doing this, putting back $2.86 million to the dispensaries in Boston. And Kobe Evans, I know from Pure Oasis, was needless to say, he's thrilled about it, didn't expect it. And these people, the people that are in the dispensaries right now in Massachusetts, this is 4 years into this program, people, okay? They're struggling to make a living. They're struggling to figure all this out because the regulations and the compliance issues are so strangling. The governments have done a great job of retarding the start of the industry. Forget about the growth. It's retarding the start, not even giving an opportunity to those that put up hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to get the darn store open and licensed properly and do it the right way. And now, right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The incredible, the people that made that, pushed the legislation, created this legislation, you know, the Will Luziers, the Chris Andersons, the Chanel Lindsays, the Shalene Titles, that put this together, did some crazy stuff. They built this car, and the governor, he slashed our tires, took the gas out, you know, put a banana in the tailpipe, loosened all the spark plug cables, was like, here you go.
And thank you, Governor Baker, for your service. Don't let the door hit you in the butt as you leave, because it's the same governor, by the way, who shut down adult use in March of 2020 in this state when the pandemic hit.
Yeah, and guess who sued him?
There you go. Well, and well,
we lost, but I've been trying at every turn to be an asset to this industry.
Well, you've done, think about your life just for a second here. You gave your life to the cause. Now you are a perfect example of someone who wasn't just going to sit around and talk about things. You actually said, I'm going to actually get into local politics and make sure that the people in my backyard and around me understand what this plant is all about. And that's why we have so much respect for you. And I so appreciate you taking time out of your Veterans Day to join us and tell your story again. Do you ever get tired of telling that story, by the way?
I do, but you know what? It's breaking stigma. And I do not like this phrase, breaking stigma, right? Because I think people think that talking about it is how you do it. Like you said about cannabis. Okay. The way they want to frame it is lazy stoners, right? So instead, do the opposite. Like I've since making the switch, I've ran for office. I've become a better father, become a better husband. I stand out in front of my kids, in front of the schools in town. I've been standing out there almost every morning since May, fighting bullying. So it's living the life that's the opposite of that stigma. You know, like that's what it comes to do. It's not just talking about it, it's doing it, but it's sharing your story. And yes, I get tired of telling it because I've heard it so many times. But if it helps one person, it is worth me being like, oh, I don't like talking. Right. So.
And I love that about you in so many ways, because you kind of dropped it in there at 1 a.m. You left the house and helped a fellow veteran in need who needed just someone to listen to. If there are people out there, whether they be veterans or not, what are some of the things that you can do if you feel like, you know what, I'm done, right? That's life is so precious, isn't it?
It really is. And I want people, everyone out there is worth, they're valuable. You're worth every attempt at saving your life. For people with addiction, you are worth 100 times Narcaning you. I don't care what other people say that there should be a limit. You're valuable. You made it through so much and made it here. We want to keep you here. You're loved, and you're needed. And really, yeah, it's just, I don't like that people like to focus on the negative so much anymore in life, you know? And it's like, yeah, we do have a lot to be mad at. We do have a lot that we disagree on, but we all agree on so much. And there's so many common threads that we can align on and work together instead of just being, I don't like you. Okay, we've established that. Now we have to work. And veterans know how to do that. Again, I keep going back to vets, but we know how to do it better than everybody, because we didn't get to choose who's in our squad or platoon. You have to work with them. You got to get over the things, or your tank is going to get blown up, or that's how it works.
That's right. Stephen, I could talk to you for hours, right? And I so appreciate it. But here's my gift to you, because you were willing to sit here for 2 hours and be guest host today. I just want to let everybody understand that. And but it was Veterans Day. Needless to say, a lot of veterans don't want to, be on a talk show on a Friday afternoon on Veterans Day. And you made this sacrifice for that. So I do appreciate that in so many ways. I think you know that.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right. Well, he's Stephen Mandilli, and he is a perfect example of a great American. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time, Stephen Mandilli. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm not going anywhere except over there at my desk to get in the chat room. If you want to chit chat, I'll be there for the next hour and a half. Okay, because you're going to listen to other stories that are just as compelling and gut-wrenching than you heard just now from Stephen Mandilli. Don't go away. All right. I'm not even going to sign off the show because the show, I guarantee you, I said it's a whole new world of weed at the end of the other show. So I'll leave that be. Enjoy the rest of this program. Remember to thank your servicemen for their time, effort, and sacrifice. And stay tuned. There's plenty more coming up after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Ready to rock? Yes?
Let's rock and roll.
Let's rock and roll. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Green Rush Live, the business of cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm David Rabinovich, live from Syracuse.
So we've got Syracuse, we've got the Boston area, and our first guest on this Veterans Show is Dana E. Shoked, who is the CEO of O2 Vape Company out of Michigan. Dana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, of course, even though we are concentrating on veterans in the cannabis business, I got a press release from a mutual friend of ours, Tess Woods, and I was intrigued with the angle of this story that the vape industry may not be able to get deliveries of their products in the next 30 days. Can you kind of explain how this ended up on a COVID relief bill and how it's going to affect the vape industry?
Well, I most certainly would love to know how they tucked it into the 5,172nd page of a stimulus bill that was supposed to help people, keep their homes and get paycheck protection, and instead they stuck this in, I believe, at the 11th hour. And it's really going to have a massive impact on people being able to get their medicines, on veterans being able to get their medicines that might be using it for PTSD or to overcome some of their injuries that they may have sustained while serving their country. And I would love to know, because ironically, last night, they ruled that you couldn't put in the minimum wage price increase into the stimulus package, but yet you just put something else into the stimulus package that had nothing to do with COVID relief a month and a half ago.
Well, we all know a month and a half ago, it was a little bit different environment.
This is true.
Let's just
This
say.
is true.
And there was all sorts of wheeling dealings going on at the last minute of that COVID bill because they were all
Absolutely.
pressured. And I'm not a big fan of how politics works, but I certainly recognize how it works. Why are they singling it out? I was reading a little bit about it, and it has to do with a E-Cigarettes to Children's Act that was in 1949, the Jenkins Act. I mean,
so they took the Jenkins Act and they modified it to include anything, and I don't have anything to show you up here on my desk right now. I get my staff to get some stuff, but they basically took that and they modified it to include anything that you vaporize, no matter what form it's in, whether it be wax, shatter, CBD, essential oils, vitamins, anything. If you are putting it into something to vaporize it, they now have considered that to be a cigarette, and are going to constitute people that do that and may not follow the rules properly, which are insane rules, that you'd become a cigarette trafficker. So they've now taken anything that has to do with vaping, a cartridge, a battery, a USB charger, a wall charger, because it says any accessories, any part thereof. I mean, if you read the wording, they have basically encompassed everything into that you can no longer ship them through the United States Postal Service. Okay, fine. A lot of people don't use the post office, but then immediately after that, FedEx came on board and said they were going to do it. And then UPS came on board and said that they were going to do it. But the interesting part of the other two entities that are private, because the bill did not attack private entities. It was only going after that the United States Postal Service must adhere to this, okay? Which they're in enough trouble as it is. They can't afford to lose any business, okay? And that's a huge loss for them. I mean, we ship a lot through them, or used to, but not only that, you're talking about the hemp bill and the hemp act. You know how many, we make hardware for a lot of CBD companies that obviously then ship their legally CBD oil through the mail that are helping people and veterans with PTSD and so on and so forth. And now they're going to cut that access off to them. But ironically, the way that UPS worded it is they said they would stop all vaping to, from, and within the United States. So they're stopping the importation, the exportation, or delivery within.
David, you got anything? Because
No, I was looking at the press release. I mean, it is, it sounds like one of those, the law of unintended consequences. This was likely efforts to curb the vaping problems that we had last year that were not simply cannabis related. And unfortunately, cannabis has now got sucked into it.
And they have got sucked into it, but also too, part of the thing about the vaping crisis, and I use the air quotes about that happened, that started literally, actually, it was in the summer of 2019. So it's almost 2 years ago, when it was the vitamin E acetate that was going around in the cannabis, but that was all black market THC that really didn't have hardly anything to do with the legal dispensaries that O2 Vape works with, the legals, the state, the multi-state operators that we make hardware for. But for them to hide behind and say that this is about the children, it's really not about the children. And even though I'm really not in the e-liquid or the e-nicotine side of the business, I have friends that have businesses that are about to lose everything because of the Pact-Jenkins Act, because of the PMTA. This honestly is all about big tobacco. It's all about big tobacco and big pharma and pushing the small to medium people out. And because ironically, they're saying that if you can still ship through those purposes, if you have an FDA approved device through the PMTA, which is the Pre-Market Tobacco Act that they put into play. But the only people right now that have anything approved through the PMTA is RJ Reynolds and Philip Morris.
So I have a question for you.
Sure.
How does, if I'm running a company, and by the way, let's put marijuana or cannabis aside for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a fan at all of vaping, like vaping nicotine and some of the other things that get vaped. But how do those firms get their nicotine? I would think they have to buy from big tobacco.
No, because tobacco is not nicotine. Nicotine is not tobacco. Nicotine is in tobacco, but they're not making, but nicotine is not from the plant. It's not, nicotine and tobacco are not the same thing. Okay. And I'm sorry to hear that you say that you're not, because it has saved, nicotine vaping has saved thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's lives. And it's just because you may not be educated enough, because it's, everybody pays attention to what's in their own world and what affects them. But it has saved, nicotine doesn't cause cancer. It's the tobacco and the tars and the chemicals that cause the cancer and the combustion. You're talking about most nicotine liquids are some flavoring and some vegetable glycerin or propylene, PG. That's it. There's people who vape that don't even vape nicotine. The whole idea of it is you start off higher, you wean down on the nicotine, and then it gets you to, and most people still, like that feeling of it. So I have friends that vape zero. Yep, I have a staff member that vapes zero. It's just flavor. They like the flavor. It still gives them that feeling of inhaling and exhaling, but there's no nicotine in them. But that's really where, but I mean, you're talking about, you can look at people who have, maybe had bad lungs from smoking and look at their x-rays and scans from prior to smoking to people that couldn't even run, that now run. So it really is, it's not fair to compare even nicotine vaping to smoking.
Okay.
And there is a big industry for this now, and
it's a multi-billion-dollar industry,
right?
But it's mostly mom and pops. And even for the small vape stores, there was a study that came out that for small businesses, brick and mortar vape shops had more employees in the 10 and under than any other industry in the country.
I could believe that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it came about because we've run through this locally near where Jimmy and I are at.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the problem was vape shops were not being as tight as they should be, and vapes with nicotine was showing up in high schools.
It really wasn't even coming from the vape shops, to be fair, sir. It was really coming from more of the convenience stores and the 7-Elevens. But most of the brick and mortar stores, they have age verification. Most of the people that ship online, even here at O2 Vape, we have age verification check on our website. You have to put in your social security. If they can't verify you, you have to upload your driver's license, your social security number. So even for our online presence, which we don't sell anything that contains anything in it. And for me, the way I feel here at O2 Vape is that I sell empty hardware off of my website. Okay. And so to me, that's like buying a gun with no bullets or a car with no engine.
So you're not even selling the oils. You're not selling.
I don't sell the oils. I am a hardware manufacturer and producer and distributor. So this is going to take me, so I make the hardware for the clients that we talked about that I have, in Massachusetts, and I worked with, some of the original license holders in the state of New York. I made the hardware for one of the very first license holders in the state of New York when New York went medicinal. We have a ton of people that we make for in the state of Michigan. We have clients all over the country and in other countries. And if I can't get them their hardware that they're going to be making the oil to put in it, to then ship it to the dispensaries legally in their own state, we now have an issue of federal rights trumping the state's rights that people voted on and implemented in their state, that they, as a medical marijuana patient or as even as a recreational patient in the state of Michigan or New Jersey just went rec, or Colorado, you have the right to consume that cannabis, whether it be in flower, concentrate, tinctures, or edibles. By them doing what they have done, they have now taken that right away from states that say I have the right to consume my medicine that way.
Do you have any idea the legislators who were able to sneak that into the back?
Dianne Feinstein was in charge of it.
Okay. And I'm guessing you've contacted your own local congressman
working on it. I mean, it really came out of nowhere. We got we really got blindsided. It came out on the 20th, or was like the day before inauguration or something, that the ex-president signed it in the stimulus bill. And so it really came out of nowhere. It hasn't even been a month, to be honest. I mean, that this just came into effect. And so I have spoken with Dana Nessel, the Attorney General here in Michigan. So trying to work with her office and with our legislation here. But, O2 Vape has been, we're involved in some veterans. We give veteran discounts to companies. We work with other veteran-owned organizations that have CBD companies. I was involved in the Last Prisoner Project. I'm donating to that. I'm involved with another company here, another brand, couple brands in Michigan called Redemption and Driven Grow, that all the proceeds go to help, a certain percentage go to help the Last Prisoner Project. We just helped get someone freed that was in prison, Michael Thompson here in Michigan, that was in prison for almost 30 years for
Great
pot.
It's a great story.
Yeah. And I was, we helped in that. So we're very proud of that. And, I'm proud that I'm a veteran owned company. I have veterans on my staff. As I said, we give veteran discounts. And this is a really big thing. And again, it's like, as far as what it's going to do to brands that the other thing too, that's part of it for the online sales is, suppose you're a patient and you live in BFE, North Dakota, okay, or Oklahoma, or even if you do live in a very populated city such as Ann Arbor or New York, but especially during COVID times, or maybe you have a delivery service, because delivery service is it, and you have your medicine delivered to you, or you have your recreational vape delivered, but you're like, what, I don't like the vapes that they sell, or they don't sell any vapes, or they don't deliver them, so I want to go online to O2 Vape and get a battery. Okay, now I can't ship you a battery.
Yeah,
That does sound a little overreaching.
go
ahead.
Go ahead, David.
No, go.
Well, I just wonder how how the industry is going to get this rectified. You do know that they have another COVID relief bill that you mentioned, the minimum wage thing that they just ousted.
Yeah.
So I would hope that they might be able to make a change on this next bill that hopefully will get passed. I mean, we all know right now Washington, D.C. is can I call it a transitional time still?
Sure. But I don't even think, to be honest, Jimmy, I don't think they really know what was in there, because now there's a lot of senators and congressmen that are against vaping, but you cannot confuse. And as much as I do support any kind of vaping, if I am 18 or 21, and don't get me started about it being 21 to even smoke cigarettes. I'm 18 years old. I'm old enough to go to war, vote for the president, die for my country, be in a foxhole, get married, have a credit card, buy a house, go into student loan debt, but I can't have the right to vape if I want, or buy a pack of cigarettes. There's something wrong with that equation.
Or even have a beer with your buddies. Okay.
Exactly.
Look, I don't know about you, but I moved into college on my 18th birthday when the drinking age was 18. And I did seem to graduate from that college and have had somewhat of a successful life up until now. But seriously, needless to say, I didn't want to get you on the bandwagon, but you did. I too share that it should be 18. We're not putting in enough money, research, whatever, behind education of how to talk to young people about these products. And I'm talking about all these products, including caffeine, which is by far the most abused drug in our society. 91% of us get coffee in the morning in the world.
You have children drinking Bangs. I agree with you. Bangs and these energy drinks that have more caffeine, 300 and some milligrams of caffeine in one of them. They're drinking 2-3. We've had children die from caffeine. But please make no mistakes. Also, nicotine is about as safe as caffeine as well. So it's really not. But as far as for cannabis, and what we do here at O2 Vape, and we really do try to comply with all of the laws, and we will still try to comply and do our best to comply with the laws, whatever it is, and trying to find. But it's not just even really, honestly, if you read the law that you have, it's not just about a vape pen. It says anything. So you're talking about, I don't want to mention some big brands, but there are big brands that this is going to affect. They don't care if it's an oil, if it's dry flower, even. There's big brands out there that you can buy a dry flower pen or they use volcanoes, for instance,
right,
in a hospital. That is an electronic vaporizer. That is covered under that act.
I'm sure you're a competitor with a certain company that has 3 letters in the name. You probably know it, right? Am I right? So I'm not going to mention it, but the last letter is near the end of the alphabet. Let's just leave it at that. That being said, is there a vape industry association that is?
So I'm involved with the only one that I'm involved with is there are some have gone by the wayside, but I am a member of the USVA, the United States Vaping Association. And there is a challenge to the PMTA and some other things right now. We hope it's going to get heard up to the Supreme Court. We're at that Supreme Court level. They did agree to hear parts of it. So we have hopes for that. That is a member organization only, but the regular vaping, I don't believe they don't really have the lobbyists. Of course, the tobacco industry does, and the cannabis industry does. And I'm hoping that we can get some of the cannabis industry lobbyists behind this, because you are talking about, I mean, I'm not a small company by any means. And, but I also give, my employees health benefits and medical and dental and profit sharing and 401k. So I have employees that I'm worried about because of this. And
are you considered an MRB, a marijuana related business?
I don't know if they would consider me that. I mean, I think you could ask if they would consider me that in one point, and another point, depending on who you're asking, they would say I'm not.
Yeah, but look, we get classified that way, and we don't touch the plant as a business anyway. But because we take money from the cannabis industry, we are put into that category. And
Sure.
I'm guessing you have
yes,
clients that are in the cannabis industry.
So for that way, yes, correct. I mean, banking can be sometimes, and exactly. So yes, so for that respect, yes. So
what can people do to help the cause, or maybe get the word out in some capacity for the whole vaping association?
I think people really need to get to whoever lobbyist, whatever industry people they have high up, whether it's NECA or somebody, and get to their state reps, to their state Congress people. Because again, this is about trumping the state's rights, right? If my right says that I have that right, now they might say, well, you could drop ship it, or you could this or whatever, but how am I going to get the goods? When our stuff comes in from our factory, we inspect it all, we look at it, we make it, we ship, and then we ship it back out to our clients. Now you might be able to get some private logistics companies, and you can get a box truck come here, but the problem is not everybody buys everything that's on a pallet. So it's going to be the smaller. What if I have someone who only has 5 boxes, 150 pounds? No trucking company is going to come here for 5 loose boxes.
Right.
Well, we do have a Massachusetts state representative scheduled to come on in the next half hour with Stephen Mandilli, who is a veteran, one of the biggest cannabis advocates, and is also a selectman in his town. We'll at least share with them this information because I don't think too many people know about it, to be honest.
I really honestly do not think people do. And I mean, I really do not think that people know about it. I've gotten a couple of emails from some mailing lists that I'm on, from some that somehow they find me and they think I sell nicotine, which I don't. And they've started to touch on it. But, O2 Vape is really all about safety. all of our stuff is heavy metal tested. We've complied. We were doing heavy metal testing and stuff, and we use 304 stainless steel. We have all glass cartridges, all ceramic. We are all about health and safety here. We don't have oil. We don't make it. So we rely on our testing from the labs when we send out something to the clients we were talking about in Massachusetts and things like that we make the hardware for. They get our stuff tested. So we are all about safety and compliance, and we will continue. And it is an evolving industry. I mean, there's some new laws coming out in Colorado that I think are a little bit of I don't think it's fair about the emissions of what you emit.
Right. Colorado's going to be the first state to actually have emissions tests in the United States.
Do you test emissions from a cigarette?
We know that that's not a good thing, but for the vaping, this is the first time they'll be tasting that. I totally hear some of the injustices that you're bringing up for your industry, but it is 4:20, which is usually the time that we take our first break. So Dana, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your feelings about this, because it's going to really impact your industry. And I think
it is.
That might be terribly unfair in a lot of ways here. So if I can do anything to help, and through your interviews or the state representative or whoever you've had on, but we need to get the word out to our state reps, to our attorney generals, because I have to report my sales to the attorney general offices now. I can ship a handgun with way less restrictions than what I can for a $20 vape battery now. And so we need to get our attorney generals involved. We need to get our state reps involved, and anything that I can do to help, or people you want to put in contact with me, that'd be great. Or anybody that wants to contact the USVA and Jared Navarre, our attorney, or anybody like that, we need to get that, or Travis Pinkerton, he is the president of the USVA. We need to get that going, because it is going to have a big impact. And I don't know if people are just kind of sitting back waiting to see what happens, but we do need to. But O2 Vape would love to, help and be involved in anything that we can, but they're going to need to know. You got it, Dana. Thank you so much for joining us here today on our Green Rush, the Business of Cannabis show. It is 4:20. That is usually the time when we
light
take
them
our
up.
break. What's that?
Light them up. It's 4:20.
Light them up. Well, now let me ask you a question, Dana. Do you know the origin of 420?
Do you?
Yes, I do. I usually orate it every time around this time. It started in San Rafael, California. A bunch of high school kids called the Waldos used to meet across the street at the Louis Pasteur statue at 4:20 and catch a buzz out in the public, until the law enforcement people picked up on that routine and then adopted that 420 call as public consumption of cannabis going on at the corner of Main and Vine Street. And that became the code, if you will. The cannabis community then adopted it and embraced it, and now celebrate April 20th and, of course, 4:20 on Friday. So we're going to take our break now.
I'm going to go take a puff off of my O2 Vape Flip Ultra, or the Platinum that you can only get here.
You want to listen to Jonathan Edwards sing the song Shanty, though, because his song was my version of 420 when I was growing up. So enjoy that. We'll be back with our Veterans Show after this break. Don't go away.
As a broker, we have access to many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu. So it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways, and they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
All right, welcome back to the Green Rush, the last 60 minutes of this show. And this is usually the time when we open up the forum and welcome in pretty much as many people as we possibly can that have the link into our show. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And
David, his sidekick.
There you go, my sidekick. I love that. That's crazy. But David is with us, and we're focusing on veterans and entrepreneurship and the role that cannabis and the cannabis industry has played in this. And there's so much passion in this room right now. I'm really just going to kind of take attendance here a little bit and make sure everybody who we think is in the room, introduce everybody a little bit. And then the easiest way to do this is to actually call on you to give yourself a little background about what you do and that sort of thing. So I'm going to try and play moderator here. But I know Ann Brum is still with us. Stephen Mandilli is still with us. And we welcome in Max Piragallini. Did I do it right, Max?
Yep, very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Rand is with us. Tom Rand?
Yep. How you doing?
There with Patriots Helping Vets. Roland Cordova is with us. Roland, how are you?
Couldn't be better, Jimmy. How are you?
Good. Nice to finally kind of see you.
Same here.
All right. And I do believe, is Stanley Atkins with us as well?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so Stanley Atkins is here as well, and we brought back Dana Shockett. She's the CEO of O2 Vape, and I'm going to start with Dana because I'm going to ask her to make it really quick and please let this room know what the vape industry is facing in the next 30 days, because even Stephen admitted he didn't understand, he didn't recognize the fact that, oh my God, you're not going to be able to ship your products because of this little clause that was snuck in the last COVID relief bill. So Dana, I'm going to give you a minute and a half here to kind of tell a little bit about what's going on, and then we'll go into our discussion. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely. So thank you, Jimmy. As you said, I'm the owner, president, and CEO of O2 Vape. I've been in the industry for 8 years. I am a veteran as well. Started this out of my garage and have grown it to one of the premier manufacturer hardware producers for the cannabis and CBD industry. They stuck a bill in. Dianne Feinstein, I believe, was the sponsor of it. There are other senators that did sign on to it as well, but she was the spearhead of it, where they took a 1940-some act called the Jenkins Act, and they modified it and then also brought in the PACT Act, which is the Prevention of Online Cigarette Trafficking Act. So they have now classified anything that is a vaporizer, anything. And that is whether it is and I'm going to name drop, even though I don't want to name drop some of my competitors, whether it's a PAX, a Puffco, a Volcano, a Da Vinci, anything that you are vaporizing, or that any component or part thereof that you are putting anything in, and they specifically laid out whether it is CBD, THC, essential oils, vitamins, nicotine, anything that you now fall under this, whether it's empty or non-empty, and any accessory or part thereof. So even like the vape charger that comes with, that we sell, the little micro USB charger is now considered a cigarette. And you are now not allowed to ship your products through the United States Postal Service. But unfortunately, the other entities that everybody might use, the two other big ones, FedEx and UPS, have also signed on to it. So for a CBD company that is then selling and shipping, maybe it's in My Hardware, and they've filled it with their oil and they're shipping. We have a huge client down in North Carolina that is a veteran-owned hemp company, and they do nothing but CBD, and we can hardly keep him in hardware. That's how much vape CBD products are selling, but it's drastically going to hurt the vape industry.
So like the veterans haven't been heard enough, by the way, when it comes
Exactly.
to access. Now you're going to take the vape hardware away from them.
Yep.
So I want to start, let me go to Max. Max, you out there?
Yes, sir.
When you hear that they're going to shut down the vape shipping industry, basically not allowing, how do I don't know if you do vape, if you do smoke, or what you do, but how difficult is it going to be for you to maintain use of medicine?
You're going to push people to the black market.
Exactly.
Plain and simple. You're going to push people to the black market. You know, vaping for some people can't smoke because of the heaviness, I guess I'll call it. Yeah. And to remove things like a PAX and a Volcano, which I know gets used for a medical basis, you know, on a daily basis, to have that gone is just preposterous.
Well, but the thing that I talked to Jimmy about is that from the e-commerce side, so we have our business per se is we have a lot of veterans that come on our site. We give a military discount off of our site, and they're just buying the empty hardware. They might have a delivery service that brings them their medicine, but they buy the battery from us, or the cartridge, or our wax pen, or our dry herbal pen, whatever it is. But if I also have about 70% of our business is to the people who make the wax, who grow the flower, who make the oil. So they're buying, you know, Massachusetts is a huge state for me, huge state. I work with a lot of the big players in Mass. They get their hardware from us. They sell our hardware. I'm not going to be able to ship them their stuff.
All right, hang on. Hold on, Dana. Hold on. Okay. Let's get Tom Rand from Patriots Helping Vets in there just to kind of chime in on this as well, Tom. More difficulties for access to medicine and titration, like you guys don't have enough working against you, right?
Right. I mean, I'm not familiar with the laws and the rules of the vaping industry and all that. Our thing at Patriots Helping Vets, we just help veterans for free. If you need to start growing or you need some meds or whatever, we get it to you and we help. Unfortunately, a lot of the guys do go to the black market because that's one of the few things that we don't provide a lot of is the vape because of the how hard it is to get a hold of them. Right. I mean, we survive on donations, so for us, it's a lot easier with just the flour, concentrates, and other things like that for the guys versus the vapes because, like you say, they cost money to produce. So I feel bad for the guys that use it. I know quite a few of them that use it because of the work that they're in. They can't be, firing up and smoking a joint, but they do have a couple hits off the vape, whether CBD, THC, whatever. It helps them get through the day. Right. Now you're telling me that they're not even going to be able to, it's going to be harder for them to obtain that it's kind of very discouraging, to be honest with you.
Oh, it should piss you off, basically. I'm going to tell you that right now. PatriotsHelpingVets.org, by the way, is your website. I want to make sure I get a plug in for you. Roland Cordova, tell us about what you do, where you're from, and what is You Grow Rentals all about? Because I know, but I want you to share it with everybody in the room, if that's okay.
It'd be my pleasure. Jimmy, we actually have two companies, but You Grow Rentals are state licensed grow facilities for individuals that have a license to grow their 6 plants in California, organically, inexpensively, and strain specific. So depending on what their problem is, we are going to allow them to have a place away from their home to grow their plants. And then what we do is we extract it and make it into an oil for them to use however they want. But it's all medicinal. We don't deal with recreational. We deal only right now, all of our employees are veterans. We have another company called Veterans Cannabis with a Z.org that are Navy SEALs, top of the line doctors in cannabinoid medicine from the American Cannabinoid Clinics. And so what we do is we mentor our veterans and train them in the cannabis industry and then have a job for them waiting when they get out.
Got it. There you go. See, he's doing the right thing. I love that. Stanley Atkins is out there. I've seen him patiently waiting, and we haven't called on him. So I'm going to call on Stanley to tell us a little bit about the Stanley Group and what you're doing and what's your background.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Stanley Atkins II. I am the CEO and founder of the Stanley Group. It is a business consulting and management firm. So I'm currently partnered with several clients here in the state of Georgia who are actively pursuing a cultivation license for the cultivation and production and dispensing of low THC oil. I started a platform years ago known as the Cannabis. For those who follow me on social media know me as the Cannabis. I'm a retired firefighter paramedic. And when I got into this space, it was due to my own health issues. And I realized that we didn't have legislation on the books. There was no one that looked like me who was down at the Capitol advocating not only for patients, but also for veterans. I served 2 deployments, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom. And the way I really found my niche in the industry was I saw that there was a significant disconnect between the correlation of technical information and the lay person who needed it. You know, you had a lot of these physicians and business owners throwing these big words and endocannabinoids out there, and people just couldn't relate. So I've had the profound opportunity to work with companies all over the country. I've actually spoken in Boston on the main stage at the Boston Freedom Rally back in, I think that was 2018. I just got back from Las Vegas for a 2-day event we had out there. And I'm here today to really give my input as far as veterans, businesses, and the way the industry is going, because the way the industry was isn't the way the industry is. And I saw the O2 vape logo behind her. I saw the stand-up behind her. I was invited to a cannabis business pitch last summer, and there was someone from O2 Vape on there talking about their hardware, and it was hands down the best conversation I've ever heard anyone give in regards to the physical production and the content of the hardware. You know, you have a lot of cannabis brands that are upset that things don't pass testing or things are outside of parameters. Well, a lot of people look at, well, we know we made this good oil, we cut it with this good solvent. What happened? Your hardware. What type of metals? Is it ceramic? Did it come from China? Where did it come from? You know, where is the quality control? So I've had the opportunity to work with lots of brands in the industry, lots of physicians. I recently just wrapped up a 2-day medical town hall event with the Morehouse School of Medicine and the Satcher Health Leadership Institute.
Wow, that's great. Oof. I love that. And I love it when people can kind of reconnect. We miss the conventions, people. Do we not miss the conventions? I think we all agree that, and especially a cannabis convention, you know, the plant itself, to me, brings people together. It always has, even when wink, wink, we did it around the corner. Now that it's legal, we're out, we're talking about it. We still miss that camaraderie and the ability to share ideas and the passion for this industry. So I'm hoping as the vaccinations slowly roll out and get into people's arms, we're going to see the end of the year. I'd love to see everybody in Vegas happy again in December.
So, right? No, it's actually moved this year.
They moved it earlier.
October.
It's in the fall, right?
It's in October this year. So yeah.
Right. Absolutely. I think they may end up sliding it, but let's not tell Chris Walsh what to do. Okay. The only person I don't think I've introduced, and he was with us, I'm pretty sure before, is Ryan Cohen. Ryan, you're out there, right?
No, we have Will though.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I thought Ryan was out there. Who's out there? Tell me who it is, David. You know who it is.
No, we on the very bottom here. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see. How'd you get into this room?
I snuck in, man.
Tell us who you are and why you're here.
So my name is William Carroll, former Navy veteran. Working right now with Roland Cordova on the veterans cannabis side. So he's running the U-Grow side and I'm doing the veterans cannabis side. So I'm his counterpart. So he forwarded me the invitation to get on here to speak whatever you guys need me to speak to.
Oh, great.
I want to know where you are because you look like you're in somewhere sunny outside, a lot warmer than Michigan.
I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Whatever.
Everybody in the room from New England was just going, oh.
I know, I'm sorry. I'm from Maine, though, so I know your pain.
All right.
Where in Maine? Got to ask you. Where in Maine?
Boothbay Harbor.
Oh, love it. Spruce Point Inn.
Yeah, I do know that. I've been there a few times.
So I spent 11 years in Maine, probably before you were born, doing sports in the 80s, let's just say.
What'd you do in the Navy, Will?
I was a Navy SEAL.
Oh, you were the Navy SEAL. All right.
Wow. I got to tell you, everybody in this room, I don't understand how in the world, especially with the divisiveness that this country has gone through, if we can't agree on helping our veterans, we are never going to advance as a humanity. Okay. Yeah, I just don't the politics, the labeling, the political parties. It just drives me nuts when it comes to this issue that you can't go to the VA and even talk about medicinal marijuana. Stephen, going back to Stephen Mandeli here, because, you know, we know your story, but I'm not so sure everybody in this room knows your story. Would you be willing to share what you went through and how you got off your opioids?
Sure thing. So my story isn't unlike so many other veterans. Got deployed, was injured on duty, spinal cord injury, you know, went from base to base, from hospital to hospital, being told different things. Each hospital and each doctor visit got another pill of more bottles. And that led me down a path at the VA when I got home of 10 years and 57 different medications, including 8 different opioids over that time. Was told, you know, oh, don't worry, we have a formulary full of thousands and thousands of medications. We'll find the right one for you, and you know, everything will be all right. So, you know, it was 10 years of that. At first, I felt the effects of feeling different. Shortly after that, it wasn't, you know, I didn't care anymore that I felt different. I just thought, okay, this is it. I'm doing what my doctors tell me. You know, they've told me to mourn who I was before. You know, I'm not going to be able to have the job that I had been aiming to have my entire career, and trying to then, you know, readjust direction to go. But on all those medications, I couldn't think any other way but being angry at everything. And that just snowballed. Like I said, it was 10 years. And towards the end of that period of time, you know, I had daughter was born, second daughter was born. Then I start getting hit with, what can I teach my kids? I'm at home every day, taking all these medications. I'm not a successful member of society. I don't know what to do. And that led to a suicide attempt. Tried swallowing a handful of my Xanax, Percocets, Ambien, and fentanyl patches. But I choked that back up, and just kind of was just beside myself. What was going on, and having no idea how to even think, you know. And the doctors just keep telling me, well, you have nothing to do. So just, you know, if you're feeling this way, take this. If you're feeling that way, take that. And I did that. So fast forward to my wife back in 2015 came to me and mentioned to me, you know, it's what you're on. It's the drugs you're taking. I thought, no way, you know, I'm listening to these doctors. They wouldn't point me in the wrong direction. And she's like, well, why don't you try giving medical cannabis a try? And I was beside myself. I was like, I'm not going to sit around getting high, doing drugs. But that led me to looking into what I was taking and realizing I was taking, you know, the best heroin money could buy, synthetically made opioid in fentanyl and oxycodone. So, you know, wanted to try it. First started in the illicit market because I got my card and no dispensaries were open. So I was going to mall parking lots and buying bags off of people because I was just so desperate. Then finally a dispensary opened up. I got on a regimen, and within 5 months, I had gotten off of all my medications, you know, off all the opioids. And immediately after that was then punished by the VA for doing that. You know, I had been told, like I said in the beginning, we have all these medications. We'll find one that works for you. I happened to find one that worked for me that wasn't there. So, you know, actions were taken against me. I became a spokesperson for Yes on 4 in Massachusetts to help pass legalization because I saw it as another entry point into someone being able to access cannabis that doesn't want a card, doesn't want to be registered as a patient, but still needs access. So I was a spokesperson for that. And for that, the VA came and took away half of my benefits and said, you know, you're better now. I'm like, all I'm doing is talking. I got out of bed, you know, and now I'm better. Okay. But I had my state senator, Senator Elizabeth Warren, send a letter of inquiry to the VA, and magically after she did that, within 6 months, all my benefits were reinstated somehow. I didn't have to go through any sort of appeals process or anything like you usually have to do. And that was because, you know, I had been getting mixed messages from the VA saying it was because I wasn't going to appointments. I asked for that in writing. I got something else in writing that wasn't true. And was able to prove that. So, you know, the VA has come a little ways in their acceptance of cannabis, where now we're told we can't have our benefits taken from us. But, you know, even the physicians there don't trust that. I have a new physician this year, primary care doctor. He's very supportive of my cannabis use, supportive of other veterans, told me he knows lots of people, but said he wasn't going to put it in the system that I was using it because he didn't want anything to happen to me, you know. And I was blown away because back in October, the VA had an event and asked me to speak about cannabis and paid me an honorarium. So I'm like, here I am. My doctor's afraid to put it in the system, and that same system is paying me to talk about it. So it's so mixed up. And
it's an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's so much confusion there, and it just needs to be, you know, really looked at. Yes, it doesn't fit in an alcohol box. It doesn't fit in a prescription medical box. It doesn't have to fit in a box. It's its own thing. You know, like every other substance we use, there's risks with it. But when you're talking about this veteran segment of society, we're pretty good at risk mitigation. You know, we're walking streets in backwoods of countries with firearms and, like you were saying, the most, you know, technologically advanced weaponry. But when I get home, this plant isn't safe for me. It doesn't make sense for any veteran or really any person to have to be illegally healed, you know, which we see so much. You're finding illegal healing. That makes no sense, none whatsoever.
Yeah. I'm looking at the chat room and I'm seeing a lot of people echoing a lot of things that all of you are talking about. And one of the things that are somebody from Louisiana, Andy from Louisiana chats in, you know, used to have call-ins, now they chat in. Anyway, he's talking about not being allowed even to grow it. And you know, there's this green wave going on right now. We're seeing reform bills being introduced in legislatures in different states all over the United States. And it's the issue of the home grow. And here in Massachusetts, I think they kind of got it right because they gave adults 6 plants per adult, 12 if you have 2 adults in a dwelling. And yet, you know, you look at the proposal, the law that just happened in New Jersey, no home grow. How do you guys feel about the opportunity to actually be able to grow this stuff, especially if you need the medicine? And I know I can't call on anybody here, but
Jimmy,
who wants to go ahead?
Throw that at Max.
All right, Max, I'm throwing it at you.
All right. So my deal is I only found cannabis 4 years ago. I, like Stephen, I was a 20-year opiate patient. I was at the point where I was on hospice level fentanyl patches that were literally killing me minute by minute. Fentanyl became part of the news every day in, 2015, 2016. And I started looking into what I'd been given, and it scared the death out of me. And, I grew up in a family, in a household where there were no drugs. I had Thanksgivings where family didn't expect me to make it to Christmas. 16 months of detox, 16 months. March 4th, I'll be 1,000 days clean.
Whew.
The way that I was able to do that is home grow. I can't afford weed. Weed is too expensive. When I first went looking, I went looking on Craigslist because I didn't know anybody that smoked weed. So home grow is the most important and dear to my heart. It saved my life. To have a state where weed is legal and to not be able to grow even a minimal amount. You know, Massachusetts, the rec laws allow enough cannabis for most medical patients. You know, the 6 plants at a time will provide for most of what people will consume. I'm lucky. Somebody fought 10 years ago for my right to home grow. It needs to be expanded. There's no doubt in my mind that expanded home grow saves lives, period. Even if it's just in giving a veteran something to do, you know, something to care for, something to think about other than shit.
Perfect. I gotcha. I want to throw this out again to the room. Access to capital to launch businesses. Roland, I think this is a good one for you to handle here. Talk a little bit about how challenging it is. If you are a veteran, it's not like you've got access to all this capital. You know, you try to do something. How can we help the veterans that want to get into the cannabis business? Roland?
Well, you know, first of all, I'd like to address the last gentleman. The way that we feel is we believe that veterans should get their medicine for free. They should never have to take out of pocket to get their medicine. And that's why in our U-Grow facilities, all of our master growers are veterans. And so they're taking care of the crops for the state licensed patients. They are all we are all linked together through what are called replicating websites. So everything that we do is trademarked veteran-owned businesses, regardless what aspect they get into. And then we have, through our replicating websites, we have a platform that allows investors, especially social purpose investors who want to invest in something that makes them feel good, that they're doing something good. And we believe veterans are probably the demographic that has been the most abused, hurt, and are suffering. That's why 22 die a day. That want to help them. And so all we're doing is saying, when you get on our platform, you will see businesses, their business plans, their stories, who they are. And if you want to invest in that particular industry, we will set up that meeting. We just believe that, you know, our veterans need their medicine. We need to get them off of the toxic drugs they're getting, and we need to teach them this industry. It's historic. It's a $100 billion industry coming in the next 10 years that affects so many different facets of how it can be used. And so why would we not say, wow, here's an opportunity for our veterans to get a better life. Let's train them. But if we don't heal them, if we don't deal with those PTSD, the depression, the anxiety, all of those things that make them very insecure, then we're not going to have good entrepreneurs. And so we just believe that we got to heal them. We got to get them off the drugs. We need to use the cannabinoids to rebalance them and then train them and mentor them into a business. And there are so many businesses, ancillary businesses that are coming. So why wouldn't we give our veterans that opportunity in the interim, be able to have them getting their medicine for free?
Absolutely. And Bram,
I'd love to chime in a bit about.
This is your turn, girl. Go ahead.
I'd love to chime in about especially investing into veterans as professionals and as entrepreneurs and as leaders in the space. And that's exactly after working with Stephen on the Veterans Health and Medical Cannabis Study in 2019, as well as the branded out communications and community development arm known as Cannabis Advancement Series. And anyone can check out the research in that project. at cannabisadvancementseries.org. After working through that as a co-founder with Stephen and our colleague, Dr. Marion McNabb, it was so clear that veterans really coming from a place of service, which was my experience in hospice prior to cannabis, was an instant connection that I had with Stephen, and being able to invest into providing a voice and giving the story of veterans when it comes to their experience with feeling well, improving their quality of life, returning back to their family, as well as contributing to the development of their local communities. And specifically also with veterans contributing to advocacy, policy, and legislative initiatives as well. And at Joint Venture & Co., we absolutely do value, as an ancillary service, as a growth agency that focuses on branding and communications. That was really vital and important for us. So we absolutely value veterans being at the table, veterans having a voice, veterans really leading the charge as to how this, the access and the choices unfolding for veterans locally, regionally, and nationally. So Stephen's contributed so much to the culture of service in any way he's participated in conversation as a selectman in the town of Uxbridge and as a consultant with us at Joint Venture & Co. And also my experience here with Stanley, who is also contributing as an editorial board advisor for the Cannabis Patient Care magazine, which is a sister brand for Cannabis Science and Technology. And Stephen's on the board as well, to be able to contribute to the ongoing dialogue and conversation of how veterans are affecting the care we're receiving, product innovation, campaign development, education, all of that. I'm just being able to think outside of the box and not being afraid to have these vulnerable conversations with legislators is really important, as well as academics and researchers. So I definitely here for me personally, daughter of a veteran, friends and family of veterans, investing into veterans and their families is an absolute no-brainer. And you can, as veterans, you can also use your voice to advocate when it comes to policy and legislation. And we find that very, very valuable, and it does impact systemic and sustainable change. And I hope anyone who's listening, if you're plant touching or ancillary, that you absolutely find the value of investing into legislative and advocacy affairs, especially when they're a veteran. And if you need any assistance on that and any advice, consulting, strategy, communications, definitely please reach out to us at Joint Venture & Co. and Stephen will represent appropriately.
That's great. And by the way, the chat room is filled with people from all over the country. It's obvious that people do care about you veterans, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Texas, and that's just on the page that I'm on now. David Rabinovitz, I want to bring you in here. First of all, Ryan Cohen is the only one that hasn't
back with us. Yes,
David's with us. I know, and Ryan Cohen is here as well. But David, I know you are active in the social equity program, trying to help those who have been most impacted on the war on drugs and getting access to capital, learning how to build a business plan, getting them ready to go into business. Are the same things available to veterans? I guess that's the question I'm asking you.
So that program is, if veterans qualify, they get in, but they don't get in because they're veterans. For getting into business, if you're a veteran, you do get into an expedited line, not the priority line, which is the really fast line, but the expedited line moves pretty quickly as well. So there's a lot of licensing benefits there. But let's stick with more of what's going on with the veteran stuff. But let's take a moment, Jimmy. Ryan, you came in here. Anything you want to say to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks for inviting me back.
Yep.
I was on last week and had so much fun. I beg and prodded to come back this week. So I'm Ryan Cohen. I'm the founder of Top Shelf Canistores. Selectman Mandilly, nice to see you. He's from Uxbridge, where my facility is, and we're looking forward to giving back to the local and veteran community. I was in the 82nd Airborne. I got injured on a jump 13 days before 9/11. Had a traumatic brain injury, had back surgery. My unit shipped out without me. I got really depressed. And my life sucked for a while. And cannabis was one of the real lifelines that I had. And I got in trouble for it. So thus the social equity status. I was helping out a friend or two, including myself, back in 2006 in the wrong Commonwealth of Virginia. And unfortunately, I've been a felon for the last 12 years because of it. 2021 is supposed to be good news for me because I believe Virginia is going to be doing me a solid. And they're going to be either bringing it down to a misdemeanor or expunging it altogether. So up until the social equity program was introduced, there wasn't any bones thrown my way, pun intended. So, it's the irony is not lost on me, but the social equity program has been really instrumental in getting my business going. And there's a lot of advantages. Like David mentioned, being a veteran does help a little bit. Hopefully there'll be some more policy changes to kind of boost that up a little bit here in Mass. But I'm happy to be here. I've also been a home grower for years, so I can weigh in on that a little bit. Honestly, kind of weighing in on what Max said, sometimes the ability to grow your own medicine can really save lives, like Max said. A lot of people can't afford $100, $200 a week to keep things rolling, and to take that away, like certain states have done with their rollouts, I think is irresponsible at best. So big proponent of home grow. I really like the new legislation that came forth with the 500 square feet of canopy. I think that's a lot better than 12 plants. And I think it's a great law that I hope goes through.
How many plants, anybody want to tell us how many plants you could get in a 500 square foot canopy?
About 20 lights. So 20 really big plants or up to 50 or 60.
Wow.
Easily, even more.
Now, see, in Michigan, we have had a very generous, and that's actually what helped me start O2 Vape, is that you're allowed 12 plants, but you can also be a caregiver for up to 5 people. So you can have full card. If you have a full card, you can have 72 plants, and you can be a caregiver. So you can grow for other people, such as, which is a good way. And we were doing that. And then you could, where they messed up the system now, though. And I think just to touch on something about like why the states don't let people grow or don't give them even 6 plants is because, let's face it, this is a big business. As someone mentioned, $100 billion industry in the next few years. There's so many of these humongous multi-state operators that it's the same way that they don't want you growing it for yourself in some respects, I feel. And I work with multi-state operators, but they want you going to the pharmacy and getting your prescriptions every month. Well, they don't want you growing it for yourself. They want you to go to the dispensary and pay your, $600 for an ounce where, I think that's part of it too, why some of the states don't give the plant rights. I don't want to, I work with people in big commercial grows, but, I think that's part of it. But myself growing and growing for other people and being their caregiver, is what helped us. And we helped, I had a couple of my patients were veterans as well, but maybe that in some states for the veterans that can't get their medicine if they don't want to grow, because it is not all buds and glory growing, as anyone that's on here knows, that maybe there's a network, something that can be done like that, form some kind of a network where people still have the right to grow and then can grow or become a caregiver or take their overages or whatever and do something with it like that.
But also there really isn't like a ton of access to seeds, clones,
Nope.
nurseries. So
Nope.
when that also too, for like the state of Virginia, it would be great if they had that language in there and the infrastructure and the supply chain set up where veterans and everyone could have access to all of that. Because you can set up the grow and all the lights and but it's also a process to pop a seed, make sure it's like a male or a female, and then go through that process. So I would like to see that, legislatively speaking, be anyone having access to the plan at different stages. So,
and I don't think people understand that a lot of our, a lot of these state laws coming through, these are not being written by legislators. These are being written by lobbyists that are paid by these companies protecting, that industry. So if you're not out there doing it, then your opposition is doing it. So for everyone that's out there, it's like, we all have that ability to present legislation ourselves. So get out there and be advocating for home growth. It's hugely important. There's therapeutic value to it for those that have the physical ability, space, and everything to be able to do it. There's so much value in it, and it gives people a routine. You might not have anything to do a day, but you do have to go and check your plants. You do have to water them. You do have to go in there and make sure everything's good. So it kind of puts people on a bit of a schedule, and you're responsible for something, and it gives you purpose. Taking the ability for people to grow it away, it doesn't make any sense. That's not legalization. That's
Right.
setting up a profit structure. People have to be able to grow it.
yeah.
I-
Decrim it federally standard.
Decrim
right
it, but
now.
sometimes, and again, but along with full legalization makes the way, I think that sometimes can make the way more for big pharma, big tobacco, and big
Right.
alcohol. So that full legalization, it's just my opinion. And again, I just don't know if I think sometimes that's the full answer, because they just, you've already got big alcohol that's come in, Altria, which is the tobacco, the nicotine side, and tobacco spent $1.8 billion, to buy into it. They just came out in Forbes magazine. They want to be the biggest cannabis company in the world. And they're just legalization.
Decrim is essential before we go into
Exactly.
full.
Correct.
And,
I don't know about
and
you
the
guys.
most marginalized groups here that are being disproportionately thrown
Right.
to jail, like Black and Brown communities, that needs to end.
Hey, is anybody confident that the federal government would get it right after what they did with hemp a couple of years ago? They still can't figure out what to do with hemp in this
And they're
country.
after the hemp. They're after the hemp right now. The DEA is after hemp.
Right.
And
right.
what's,
It
so
is-
they're, but
It's
the other
time to
big thing-
deschedule. It's time to
is-
deschedule it.
But if you deschedule it though, Jimmy, you're giving in big pharma right in.
We need a decrim first, and then let's talk about
Deschedule-
other stuff after that. The money we're
Right.
spending and perpetuating prohibition and stigma, especially on our marginalized communities, which is not exclusive. It is inclusive of the veteran community, which is very diverse. So absolutely,
When I was doing toxicology, people would ask me, because I was out setting up, trying to keep the pill mills out of there, trying to keep doctors compliant. And they would ask me, they'd say, Dana, what are your thoughts about cannabis? And I'm not in the weed closet. I'll talk to anybody at Costco. I still run into doctors and stuff that I call, and they're like, what do you do? And it's funny because I'll say, well, I'm in the cannabis industry. And they'll go, what? I'm in the cannabis. What? I'm in the pot industry. And they go, oh, okay. But they would ask me, what are your thoughts on that? And I said, I still feel that way. If someone has to drop, we all know the term drop. If you have to drop, and I used to tell the docs, this is my opinion. If they have THC in their system and they're still compliant with their drugs, their levels for hydrocodone, because there truly is, even though a lot of people had problems with it, there is truly people that still do need other medicines besides cannabis. So even though we all hate Vicodin and we all hate hydrocodone and we all hate the oxys, there still are people that cannabis is not enough. Cancer patients, things like that. We all have family members, not everybody does get addicted to it. Certainly don't get me started. I could talk for hours on how the drug company did that. I lived through it. I fought against Purdue Pharma and stuff like that. But anyway, is that if you are still having to take a pain pill, and if I would tell the doctors, if they are compliant with their levels and the THC is in there, leave them alone. Leave them alone, especially if they're in a patient in a state like Michigan that you could have a medical card, or whatever other state. But I said, if you're doing a test on them and they have nothing in their system, then they're selling their drugs, and they're popping for heroin or methadone or Suboxone or whatever, then they're selling them. But because sometimes that can also still, maybe you only need to take one pain pill a day, but you augment it with smoking a joint, you might need something stronger. So but the descheduling, you're opening up, you already have Epidiolex. GW Pharma just sold for how many hundreds of millions of dollars?
7.2 billion, I thought.
Yeah, billion. They're just opening the door for more of the big pharma to come in and control and big tobacco. So that's
why we have to get out there and advocate. And
Yeah.
Stanley, I know you're doing some big stuff in the state of Georgia, and that's positioned you as from advocating continuously, but even as a professional, as you launched Stanley Group, because I know we were talking about how advocacy experience leads to professional employment and how those are valuable transferable skills from being an advocate to now being in consulting and management.
Absolutely. I found myself in that, like in the fire, because at first I didn't even know I was an advocate. I was like, I'm just passionate about helping people. And Stephen, it's so good to see your face, my brother. I want to tell you that I love you. Ladies and gentlemen, so when I first got sick in 2014, doctors told me you may have 6 months, you may have 6 weeks, you may have a year. You're being non-compliant by refusing to go to low dosage radiation therapy. My argument was, if you don't know what's going on, why would I go to radiation? I knew nothing about the cannabis advocacy groups. I knew nothing about other states and programs. So when I couldn't find any answers, I joined social media. And one of the first people I found was Stephen Mandeli. And when I saw him holding up a poster outside his Capitol, I was like, hold up. This guy's a veteran with a service dog walking on a cane at his Capitol advocating. I was like, I started messaging him, and I would make posters and hold him up to respond to his posters. And that's what I was like, you know what? I'm getting off the bench and I'm getting in the game. And my experience at the state Capitol, because they often introduce me as Dr. Atkins, and I always come back and say, I am not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I've never announced myself as one, but I do collaborate with some of the best ones in the world. It put me in a position, because if you're going to be in any industry, just like a game, you need to know the rules of the game to be effective. And in cannabis, if you don't know the policies, procedures, rules, and regulation, and who is writing those, you're already behind. Yes, you can get a license application, but you don't even know how the program runs. And so for me, being in there, going to subcommittees, going to Senate hearings and testifying, and really learning the interworking, learning that language in these bills are so imperative, where they say shall versus has the ability to, may versus shall. Those are two totally different things. And on the decrim, thank you so much, and for the comment you made in regards to Black and brown people. I have been a part of 3 successful decriminalization ordinances here in Georgia. My favorite, the city of Atlanta. It took us 16 months to do it. And what helped us push for decriminalization in the South was that Georgia has more people on governmental supervision than any other states. 1 in 13 people are either on probation or parole in the state of Georgia. Well, the ACLU did a demographic research with the city of Atlanta police, and they discovered that amongst all the cannabis-related arrests in Atlanta, 91% were African-American males between the age of 18 and 34. When they would interview officers, and you would have officers who would openly admit off record, out of uniform, that it depends on what area of Atlanta I incur that suspect. It depends on, is it in Brookhaven or is it in Zone 6? Are they driving their mom's G5? Or are they driving their dad's old Datsun pickup truck, with a donut on the tires? So there's a big issue in regards to decriminalization and really how we look at this as a business. I was on a call earlier with a legislator out of the Bahamas, and they're getting ready to introduce their medical bill. They're looking to take the pharmacy approach similar to the governmental style of Ontario. And to allude back to one more point that I heard here, Medications versus cannabis. I've been in a long battle with the VA. I was hospitalized 3 times last year, ended up having surgery on New Year's Eve and going back in for another surgery on April 29th. It has been the biggest battle because I've been opioid free for 5 years, but due to some physical things that were out of my control last year, it came to the point where I actually finally needed them. And due to the alternative wellness therapy programs that I've completed, the EVP program for alternative wellness, the VA was shocked. Like, wait a minute, you're our anti-opioid dude. Why do you want pain pills? You know, and I'm telling them, no, it alleviates and assists with some of the signs and symptoms, but it's not the end all be all. And so what I think for those physicians who are prescribing those medications and then having those patients drop for urinalysis, we need to have an educational conversation in regard to a polypharmacy approach. This is not a one-tiered. We have to take a 360 polypharmacy approach if we really want to see the efficacy of these programs.
That's why I said, if you have to have that, you know, if you're, and the other thing that sucks, and I saw it for the years that I did the toxicology, is that even if they say to you, okay, Stanley, we're going to give you a couple, but we want you THC free. So now you're going to make you wait 6, 7, 8 weeks for the THC to come out of your system, because it can take, depending on how it metabolizes, it can take that long to come out of your system. And so that's not fair either, but they definitely can augment each other. It isn't one or the other. Not every patient is the same. And I think that there has to be a lot of the education with that, as far as that they can go together. And it's not, you had said earlier, it is not, I will absolutely lose I will just lose it when people say it's the gateway drug. Oh, cannabis is going to lead to opiates. I worked during the opiate explosion. That had nothing to do with cannabis.
That's right. It's an exit drug.
It's an exit drug.
It's an exit drug. Everybody in this room recognizes that. It's convincing the rest of the world, which is what we have to try to do. And it's what we try to do here at Pro Cannabis Media, being able to give you guys a forum to, you know, share your frustrations, express your stories, and share it with peers from all over the country. I'm thrilled. Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. We've heard from
Georgia's in the house.
Right.
That's right.
Right. It's awesome. So look, guys, we've kind of run out of time, which I feel always horrible about when we get going with these open forums. But I do want to ask you all, if you want to hang in for 12 minutes after this show to watch the Weed Talk News for this week. We have a special report on New Jersey, and we get some reaction from people in New Jersey who have been in the trenches, fighting for legalization in that state for 3 years, if not longer. And all of you who are advocated for this, I salute you. And I appreciate you taking the time to share your stories. Ann and Stephen are very special. You guys, anytime, you know that you've got a forum here and a friend with me, you can use me in whatever capacity.
Thank you, Pro Cannabis Media. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you for sharing your platform to help veterans.
You bet. Anytime, guys. And we'll do it again because I think that we could even extend this for a couple more hours and get more stories from more veterans and their own journeys through the world and using cannabis. So I just want to thank everybody on behalf of my staff, Dan French, who directs it, Isabel Turner, who's the producer, and everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. So please use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, 2 more states vote in adult use of cannabis, bringing the legal state total in the U.S. to 21. So, what impact will that have on federal reform? Well, the new Republican-controlled House will have its first hearing on that in 1 week. Maryland overwhelmingly approves adult use. We'll talk with a current medical dispensary owner in that state. Plus, Diddy puts his money where his rap is and now enters the industry in 4 states with vertical integration and proper capital infusion. Pro basketball star Brittany Griner is moved to a penal colony in Russia to serve out her 9-year sentence for hash oil possession. All that, plus coast-to-coast cannabis news on Weed Talk News with Elena Pinto. Next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto. The results from the midterm elections continue to evolve, but two more states vote in adult use. Maryland and Missouri voters approved the launch of a legal market for adults, while Arkansas and both Dakotas turned it down. In Maryland, over 65% voted in favor of opening an adult use market in that state. And Mitch Trellis is the co-CEO for Remedy, a medical dispensary in Columbia and Baltimore. And Mitch has been involved with the advocacy movement in that state for 10 years. He talked with PCM founder Jimmy Young about this historic vote.
I think it was validating. To understand, to know that people have it started to normalize, and the stigma has been somewhat lifted. And it's ultimately just going to be another thing, because at the end of the day, it shouldn't be anything more than that.
The quest towards normalization. I totally agree with you on that. Do you expect Maryland to follow what Arizona did and give all those first medical dispensaries the opportunity to apply for an adult use license?
I would expect the answer to that to be yes. We've spent a lot of time, energy, money, regulation, intellectual power establishing a very, very robust medical program. And we've never seen any state legalize without relying upon that, existing medical infrastructure. I'm sure you're aware that just to grow this medicine at this scale requires tens and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment. So I don't think that they're going to try to duplicate that, especially when they intend to start the program pretty quickly. From what I understand, we see that when you wait a long time, you give the gray market an opportunity to take hold. And I know for a fact that nobody in the state of Maryland wants a gray market.
So what's next on the federal level? Good question. That is still not 100% decided, although it looks like the Republicans have gained control of the House, while the Senate makeup is still, to borrow a popular phrase this week, too close to call. Word out of Washington, D.C. is that the House will pick up the federal reform issue next week. Phil Adams has more in D.C. report.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, here at the Weed Talk News D.C. report. The state of Maryland has legalized adult use of cannabis. On Election Day, Maryland voters strongly approved a state ballot initiative that will make adult use of cannabis legal beginning next year. The measure, which appeared on the ballot as question 4, passed by a vote of 66% in favor to 34% against. That tally reflects the results of a number of recent statewide surveys, including a November 3rd Baltimore Sun University of Baltimore poll, in which 63% of Maryland residents favored legalization. The yes vote automatically triggered implementation of a companion bill that will establish regulations for the adult use program. The new law will legalize personal possession of up to 1.5 ounces of cannabis for adults 21 and older, and will also allow adults to grow up to 2 cannabis plants at home. Maryland was one of 5 states holding legalization referenda this election cycle. Missouri was the only other state to approve legalization, while voters in Arkansas and the Dakotas rejected adult use initiative in those states. The new law takes effect in Maryland on July 1st, 2023. Lawmakers in the House have scheduled a bipartisan hearing to discuss a range of federal and state-level cannabis reform issues. With 22 states and the District of Columbia now having legalized adult use of cannabis, the House Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Subcommittee will hold a hearing titled Developments in State Cannabis Laws and Bipartisan Cannabis Reforms at the Federal Level. While the details are sparse concerning the hearing's focus and witnesses, some of the topics expected to be discussed are the States Reform Act and the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, both of which seek to end the federal prohibition on cannabis. The hearing is scheduled for November 15th. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The midterm election also impacted cannabis in a number of other states. Decriminalization efforts were passed in 5 Ohio cities. Referendums were passed in multiple municipalities in Wisconsin, and out of 33 towns and cities in Rhode Island looking to allow cannabis businesses to operate, 25 of those have given the green light to get started. In Minnesota, legal cannabis had previously passed the state's Democratic-controlled House, but couldn't get over that same hurdle in the Senate. But Tuesday, Minnesota voters flipped the Senate blue, and Democratic Party leaders say they're ready to caucus on cannabis as soon as possible. On the East Coast, voters in Pennsylvania may see a similar fate after electing pro-cannabis candidate John Fetterman to Senate. Claudia Post takes a closer look at what his victory means for the Keystone State.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. A slew of good news greeted America's majority for cannabis legalization and reform this week. At the top of the list, pro-pot Pennsylvania Democrat John Fetterman clinched the win over Republican Dr. Oz for the crucial Senate seat. Fetterman has been a staunch supporter of cannabis legalization, and he has indicated that the Keystone State wants and will greatly benefit from legal cannabis. As I said, I'm waiting for adult use. Fetterman has vocally criticized President Biden's inaction on federal reform. And so now that he'll be on Capitol Hill, we hope he gives the president all the smoke he needs to push for cannabis reform. Officers in Pennsylvania will soon be piloting a new marijuana breathalyzer technology, which will detect elevated levels of THC. Of course, this is to prevent impaired driving. Officers will be able to test the new breathalyzer technology during a 3-month pilot phase in Warren County, which is somewhere to the west of Philadelphia. The process works by officers collecting breath samples from a driver suspected of being impaired by cannabis using this technology with breathalyzer, and then sending those samples to a designated laboratory to be processed. Pennsylvania officials announced they will be providing $200,000 in match funding for marketing projects to promote the state's hemp industry. The State Department of Agriculture said that nonprofit organizations that take on marketing initiatives to increase hemp sales, exports, or consumer awareness of the sector of the cannabis industry are eligible for reimbursement funds. The purpose of the program is threefold: increase consumer awareness, educate producers and consumers, and lastly, facilitate the growth and development for export markets for hemp products within the Commonwealth. These grants will feed a new industry that once the staple of Pennsylvania's economy and is again presenting opportunities for farm income and jobs, as well as new possibilities for climate-friendly, environmentally beneficial products. Do you know that in the 17th century, Pennsylvania was the largest producer of hemp? Very interesting. That's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
A majority of marijuana measures in Southeast Michigan also passed Tuesday with flying colors, and the state will also soon see a celebrity cannabis team up as Mike Tyson's Tyson 2.0 and Cloud Cannabis are working to bring Ric Flair's product line to the state. So let's check in with Michigan Normal Executive Director Rick Thompson with more.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson. Let's begin. Tuesday's night election results were a kick in the stash sack for some of the cannabis law reform efforts. Of the 32 local ballot initiatives voted on, 13 proposals which allowed positive changes in local laws passed, 13 proposals which would have allowed for positive change failed, 4 potential bans of cannabis businesses or repeals of existing permissions for businesses failed, and 2 negative ordinances passed. Of those 2 negative ordinances that passed, one is in Langsberg, where they reduced the number of adult use licenses from 2 to 1, and Oakland County's Lathrop Village, which enacted a total ban on all cannabis businesses. Speaking of Oakland County, they were as divided as ever, failing proposals in Leonard, Clarkston, and Brandon Township while approving that Lathrop Village ban. Also in Oakland County, positive results were had in Auburn Hills, Keego Harbor, and Royal Oak Township. 2 out of 3 Wayne County communities approved cannabis retail of one kind or another. Berrien County, the gateway to Chicago, as some call it, failed to pass either of their adult use proposals in Niles and Hager Township. Now, as we travel up the Lake Michigan shoreline, we see a lot of no boats floating out on the water, including no to Pinconning and Caw-Collins positive proposals, and a no to Gibson Township's proposed ban. Farther down on our eastern shore, Buell Township, under the thumb, passed their proposal, as did Imlay City in nearby Lapeer County. Michigan's west side was also a mixed bag of success. Well, this week, Michigan's Cannabis Notables performed the 2nd annual Cannabis Gives Back Telethon, sponsored by Redemption Cannabis. This year, the telethon doubled as a fundraiser for Sons and Daughters United. Last year, the telethon raised about $22,000, said Ryan Basor of Redemption on Jazz Cabbage Cafe this week. And this year, they'll haul in at least $30,000. This broadcast was carried live on the networks of Jazz Cabbage, FOB 1620, the Smoke and Rope podcast, the MICIA Canacast, and the Chad Watch platform. Participating were myself and Jamie Lowell from Jazz Cabbage Cafe, Ryan Basor, Kevin Pybus, and Tom Beller from the Smoke and Rope podcast, Kyle Miller and Chris Silva from Chad Watch, veteran Anton Harb from FOB 1620, and Sons and Daughters' own Josie Scoggin. Donations can still be made by visiting redemptioncanna.com. And that's it from the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
Last week, news broke on Friday that Sean Diddy Combs has entered the cannabis industry. Diddy, a hip-hop artist and owner of the Sean John fashion brand, came up with $185 million to buy operations in Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts. And that alone was historic, since that makes his group the largest minority-owned, vertically integrated, multi-state operator in the country. The New York and New Jersey market continues to evolve. Jill Goldsberry has that story and more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jill Goldsberry for Weed Talk News New Jersey, and here's what's happening in the area. The Jersey City Council is looking at adopting a new local law that would cap the number of marijuana dispensaries in the city at 55. The number 55 is derived from the number of applications for dispensaries that have been submitted. During a recent meeting, Business Administrator John Metro said that the number is not confirmed. However, they are approving, or they have approved 23 applications so far, and 19 of those are considered to be diverse applicants in terms of being minority-owned or women-owned businesses. And the state does not limit the number of dispensaries that can be opened in any municipality in New Jersey, but only 37 can be opened statewide until February of 2023. Currently, there are 28 dispensaries that are open, but according to the ordinance, it's in the city's best interest to limit the number of shops in the city. However, it wouldn't place limits on cultivators, manufacturers, wholesale distributors, or delivery licenses. According to Councilman Reggiano, 55 dispensaries is just way too many for the city, and so he has voted no against the ordinance. Meanwhile, another councilman, Councilman Yusuf Salah of Ward D, has voted yes for the ordinance, but he wants the remainder of approved applicants to have applicants approved to be diverse in ownership. A second discussion on this will happen later this week, and we will follow the story and keep you posted. In other cannabis news, New York City's hip-hop entertainment mogul, Sean Diddy Combs, has entered the cannabis business. And when I say enter the cannabis business, I mean the entire industry. He has agreed to acquire licensed cannabis operations in New York, Massachusetts, and Illinois from Cresco Labs and Columbia Care. And the deal is reportedly worth up to $185 million, according to CNBC. The new deal includes retail stores and production facilities in the states of New York, Illinois, and Massachusetts. And this makes the entrepreneur's first investment in cannabis also a first. He is the first minority-owned, vertically integrated, multi-state cannabis company and the world's largest Black-owned cannabis company. So shout out to Diddy on becoming another first for the culture. I'm Jill Goldsberry for We Talk News.
Another state that will be impacted by this deal is Massachusetts. It was 4 years ago this month that the Bay State opened their adult use legal market. Iraq War veteran Stephen Mandilli was the first adult to buy weed legally in Massachusetts. And he joins PCM founder Jimmy Young as a guest host on Friday's Green Rush Live show, completely dedicated to veterans in cannabis. And We Talk News producer Tori Chamberlain has our Bay State cannabis report.
Hey guys, I'm Tori Chamberlain, and here's what's happening in the Bay State this week. Massachusetts voters made history on Tuesday when they elected Maura Healey to the governor's office. She's the first woman to be elected to that position, and now the first openly gay woman to serve as a U.S. governor. And when it comes to her stance on cannabis, she's had kind of an interesting past. Healey was once against efforts to bring adult use cannabis to the Bay State, but she's since reversed her position, admitting that the public health concerns she once had are unfounded. And current Massachusetts law does allow for people with cannabis-related convictions to apply for expungement through the state. But the Boston Globe reports that back on the campaign trail not too long ago, Healey said she would be willing to follow in the footsteps of President Biden, broadening expungement efforts right here in the state and even maybe releasing people from prison. Her campaign hasn't really expanded on exactly what she plans to do and what that could look like in Massachusetts, but of course, we will be keeping our eye on that. And as more of the East Coast goes green, it could mean less money and more problems for Massachusetts, at least if you're a cultivator. Adult use weed has been legal here in our state for 5 years, but now 4 of our neighbors are getting their own markets up and running. That's Vermont, Rhode Island, New York, and Connecticut. And that means the Massachusetts market is maturing, and we're already seeing that reflected in the price of products. In October of 2021, the average price for an ounce of flower at adult use retail was $381. The Cannabis Control Commission reports that that rate plummeted to an all-time low just last month of $220 an ounce. That's a 42% drop. And just from September to October of this year, the price of an ounce dropped by another $40, which is the largest month-to-month drop recorded in 2022. The numbers do show that overall sales haven't really changed significantly, which means that consumers are still buying and probably taking advantage of those lower prices, but it's really tough to watch the burden of competition fall back onto cultivators. They're ultimately the ones who suffer from a drop in prices. And coming from California myself, where we've seen that be a problem in that market, I would really hate to see any good quality brands here in Massachusetts lose their way and flounder. So be sure to go seek out your favorite local brands, buy their flower, put money in their pockets so that they can stay afloat in this competitive Massachusetts market. But for now, that's it for the Bay State Report. I'm Tori Chamberlain.
Not so great news from overseas. WNBA star Brittany Griner has officially been moved to a penal camp in Russia as she serves a sentence for possession of cannabis hash oil. U.S. officials now growing more concerned, saying Griner will likely be required to perform manual labor at that camp. President Biden said this week he hopes Vladimir Putin will be open to negotiations, but Otherwise, no word on when or if Griner may be able to get out of that 9-year sentence. But with that, let's check in with Lex Pelger overseas with this week's European Cannabis Report.
Hello, I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations, and this is your European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. The first story today comes from the Netherlands, where the growers in the Netherlands legal marijuana production pilot program said they need more time to prepare for the launch. This was an experiment designed to regulate the sales and terminate the supply of black market cannabis to the coffee shops there. 10 growers were initially selected, but it looks like the rollout's only going to be at the end of 2023, 2 years later than the government predicted. Part of that's because none of the big 5 cities wanted anything to do with growing cannabis legally in their city, so it's only being grown in small municipalities. The growers also have trouble getting bank accounts. The energy crisis is making trouble on the supply side, and there's problems with the track and trace system used to monitor the product production from the government. So some hiccups as the Netherlands tries to bring the back end of their cannabis production into the light. In Italy, 3 Italian trade associations are taking the government to court over its classification of hemp flowers and leaves as medicine. So they'll no longer be able to be sold as a smokable product of enjoyment. They say this is contravening the 2020 Cannavape judgment, which deems them to be non-narcotic. And this speaks to the difficulty of regulating hemp among the different markets of the EU. The EU has its own opinions, and each of these states is trying to figure it out. And Italy is being somewhat regressive and hardlined about it. The last story comes from the UK with their medical cannabis program. There's a little boy named Alfie who is coming up on 1,000 days without a seizure. But he is one of only 3 kids in the country that has a funded prescription from the NHS for his whole plant cannabis treatment. This is spurring activists to call for more kids to be covered when cannabis is the only medicine that works for them. And a recent survey highlighted the problems facing UK cannabis patients, with 62% reporting unreasonable delays to their prescription, 31% have had quality control issues, over 35% spend over £350 a month, and only half of the people are allowed to consume at work. So a long way to come for the UK medical program. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. I'm Lex Pelger of White Whale Creations, reporting for Weed Talk News, and you can check out my newsletter, Cannabinoids and the People, for all of our science updates.
Back in the US, nearly half the country has now legalized cannabis for adults, 21 states in all. And while some of them have been green for quite some time, there are still changes happening to the way business is done. In Washington state, they're going so far as to study what the effects of home delivery might look like on the green market. Josh Kincaid has the story and his Washington state report.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Washington considers cannabis delivery. State Liquor and Cannabis Board conducted a survey on how to set up and operate a delivery system with an eye to ensure cannabis doesn't wind up in the wrong hands. So ever since Washington voters legalized cannabis in 2012, people have been asking for home delivery, yet home delivery brings a new set of challenges. The Department of Health said the agency does not oppose a delivery system, but are concerned about diversion. So among the issues this study must consider are how to verify authorization databases and what payment methods would be allowed. With many transactions conducted with cash, the study must look at how to ensure safe and secure transporting of products, including delivery vehicle requirements, and how deliveries by retailer operating out of Indian reservations will be handled. COVID and working from home definitely highlighted the need for delivery, but Washington is still working on legislation to hopefully improve that. There are concerns that mount with limited access in rural regions. There's also patients who live near a store, but they aren't mobile enough to get there. So when exactly is Washington going to get cannabis delivery? You're going to have to come back to Weed Talk News to find out. But with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
It's Veterans Day weekend, and many cannabis shops will salute those who have served with steals and deals on their most liked medicine. That's certainly the case in Vermont. And Jessie Lynn Dolan has more.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Heady Vermont held its 5th annual Veterans Day giveaway on November 12th with donations and refreshments for Vermont veterans. The Vermont Cannabis Control Board issued 10 new licenses at November 9th's meeting, including 5 retailers, 1 wholesaler, and 1 manufacturer. They announced that all products, including hemp products and synthetic cannabinoids like Delta 8, containing 1 milligram of THC or more per serving, will be regulated by the board. Visit ccb.vermont.gov to see the industry bulletin for more information. During the meeting, board member Julie Holbird reviewed the advertising guidance, ushering applicants and licensees to the CCB's website guidance documents for printed details. The board will host a question and answer on Monday, November 21st at 7 p.m. to go over testing, inventory tracking, and product registration. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse and ganjier, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
And finally, a cannabis company well known for its aesthetic and vibe is crossing state lines. Nevada's Planet 13 dispensary is branching out to Illinois and has chosen Waukegan for its location. The flagship dispensary in Las Vegas features a massive retail space that includes a lounge, entertainment, retail, and so much more. So we can only imagine what they are brewing up to bring to Illinois. After all, it is a whole new world of weed out there, so remember to use it wisely. And that's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media.
As a broker, we have access to many, many cannabis carriers. So I will go in with 2 or 3 quotes for people. The quotes might be $20,000 for one, $22,000 for another, $17,500 for another. Pretty close among the 3. What I tell people is it's not the pricing, it's what's included and not included, meaning exclusions. An exclusion in layman's terms is just something that's not included. It's not on the menu, so it's just not included. But if you don't know that, if no one shows you that on page 71 of a 150-page policy, you're not going to know. No one knows. I never met one person that says they read an insurance policy. If you do, I got some property in Florida for you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
So the reality of the matter is, big banks and small banks are going to be different in a lot of ways. And they're both going to have their advantages and disadvantages. For a business like cannabis, you really have to have an integral knowledge of that business and a real granular knowledge of that business and the players involved in it. And that's why if you look at the banks that are successful to play in this space in Massachusetts, they are smaller banks that are very heavy, intensified personal touch, human communication, where you don't get a lot of that with the bigger banks.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.